Welcome friends, I am Dr.V.K.Chauhan, homeopathic physician, and we are revising Ellen's keynote. This is part 5 in the series and it includes comparative study of rubrics from reverse Kent repertory, which is correlated and compared with Ellen's keynote, and this is the text which is good for PG students. This comparative study of corresponding first and second grade rubrics from Kent's repertory with Ellen's keynote is important in the sense that in this present study, first and second grade symptoms of the remedy are taken up, and they are taken up from Kent's repertory, same time compared with PQRS of Ellen's keynote. This pattern of study provides a rare insight into the understanding as well as in-depth information about the remedy under study in reference to Kent repertory. So first PQR is acute or chronic disease from unusable long continued mental exertion. This was the causation, and nearest comparative rubric in Kent repertory is mind anguish. Second PQR is always think of Argentum nitricum on seeing withered, dried up, old looking patient, thin, scrawny. This is a female. This is constitutional somatic, and we'll find reference to this is face expression, old looking, and face sunken. This is second grade representation here. PQR third, in Ellen's keynote, we find emaciation progressing every year, most marked in the lower extremities and marasmus. Now, where we are going to see, you will find, let us see the extremities, and we find in extremities emaciation, lower limbs, second grade rubric. And in generalities, again, we find emaciation as a second grade rubric. Emaciation children for marasmus, again second grade representation, and generalities emaciation upwards, traveling upwards. It is a third grade symptom given in Kent repertory, which specifically corresponds with Argentum nitricum. Generalities, emaciation children, marasmus. This is especially for marasmus, a single rubric we find, but this has only second grade presentation. PQR4 tells us about apprehension when ready for church or opera. Second part includes diarrhea sets in. So let us see where we find in mind section. Mind anticipation complaints from. You will see second grade mind anxiety anticipating and engagement is the first grade rubric, which is corresponding rubric here. Mind anxiety time is set if he has to go to at a particular time, attend important business. That is what creates anxiety and apprehension. That is second grade representation here. And we'll see rectum for diarrhea after anticipation. So that is second grade rubric present here. Rectum diarrhea excitement as before theater, it also represents the anticipatory diarrhea, but here it is first grade representation we find in Kent Repertory. There are few other rubrics which have been not given, or they have not been included probably in Argentum nitricum, and they are in the mind section. We have fear, see anxiety, fear alone being, fear church or opera when ready to, it is corresponding rubric, apprehension, fear corners to walk past certain, fear crowd in, agoraphobia, fear crowd in public places like restaurants, movies, railway platform, market, fear death of, fear disease of impending, fear fall upon him, high walls and buildings, fear high places, fear narrow places. So these are the things which are not given in Allen's keynote. We go to PQR5, time passes slowly, and its second part, which is in color code, is given. Impulsive wants to do things in hurry, must walk fast, and its third part is always hurried, and the patient is anxious, irritable and nervous. There are three components of this particular rubric, this particular PQR. So let us see PQR, how we find in mind. Time passes too slowly. So this is second grade representation here. Mind impulsive, mind hurry, time for appointed to arrive, mind hurried while walking. So these are the hurried rubrics, and we come about restlessness, always restless, anxious, compelling rapid walking. Rapid walking is because of anxiety, and this is second grade representation. Similarly, mind restless, anxious, epilepsy during intervals of, it is a aura, and it is second grade representation. Irritability you will find again given in second grade representation, mind irritability, and there is a cross reference. See anger also. Mind contrary, where we have to see contrary in the context where we want to see irritability. Mind restless and nervousness. These are the rubrics which they are related with anxiety, irritability and nervousness. Now we come to the PQR 16, convulsions preceded by the great restlessness. We have kept here with the mental generals because it belongs to that particular area only. And here we find that PQR 16 under the mind section in Kent Repertory tells us mind, restlessness, convulsions before. Some important rubrics we would like to see here. Mind jumping, high impulse, height, impulse to jump, and mind jumping, impulse to jump into the river. Means whether, I do not know whether the subject knows swimming or he has just a pleasure in jumping, but then this is a dangerous situation where his impulsiveness can put him under dire serious situation. He can get injured or he can die. So these are the impulsive symptoms which are very rash kind of a behavior pattern, tells us about Argentum nitricum, where he can inflict a very serious self-injury, and corresponding PQR is not that clearly been delineated in the Allen's keynote. They say only impulsive wants to do things in hurry or walk fast, but then this impulsiveness is something serious. Let us go to PQR 6, and we have headache, congestive with fullness and heaviness with sense of expansion. Corresponding rubric we find in the head congested, hyperemia, and fullness and pulsations is the corresponding rubric you need to see to have the complete range of remedies. But here it is a second grade representation of the Argentum nitricum in Kent Repertory. Same time, head enlarged, sensation expanded and swollen is to be seen, and this is the first grade representation in Kent Repertory. Habitual gastric literary men from dancing. So head pain gastric, head pain from dancing, second grade representation we find in Kent Repertory. Hemicrania, pressive screwing in frontal eminence or temple, ending in bilious vomiting, worse from any exhaustive mental labor. Now we find here head pain, sides on one side, head pain boring, forehead, eminence, frontal left, head pain, forehead, eminence, frontal, head pain, forehead, eminence, frontal left, head pain, boring, temples left. It is a left-sided headache where we find hemicrania. It is a migraine. It is a classical migraine where you will find vomiting is also associated. But rest of the symptoms are not given in Argentum nitricum, especially while dealing with Allen's keynote, because there is photophobia, there is patient is very sensitive to noise and he would like to be in calm and quiet place. So they need to be understood simply from hemicrania, that hemicrania represents here migraine. Better by pressure and tight bandaging. Head pain, binding head ameliorates. Head pain, pressing, binding the head ameliorates. We have first grade and second grade representation in Kent Repertory. Next rubric we find PQR 7A, acute granular conjunctivitis, scarlet red like raw beef, discharge profuse, mucopurulent, and we find corresponding reference in the eye section, eye inflammation, conjunctiva granular, eye discharge purulent. These are the two color codes which we are using here, eye discharge mucus or pus. So we have first two rubrics, which is first grade representation and discharge of mucus and pus. Again here second grade representation is also present. Now we go to the rubric 7th, but it tells us about ophthalmia neonatorum. Note the color code, profuse purulent discharge, cornea opaque, ulceration, lid sour, thick, swollen, agglutinated in morning. So these are the different shades in the same PQR symptom, and let us see where we find this particular information in Kent Repertory. So eyes inflammation infants corresponds to ophthalmia neonatorum. Eyes discharge purulent. You can see the color code and compare. Eye opacity of cornea, see the color code. Eyes ulceration cornea. Eye swollen lid, can you see the color code and corresponding first grade rubric in Kent Repertory. Eyes thickening of lids. Eyes agglutinated, first grade representation. So Allen's has not given us the gradation, what the gradation has been given in the source book. He has also eliminated that. But it is good to have this comparison where we can understand these symptoms do have certain intensities and certain gradations. However, most of the rubrics which we find are second grade and first grade rubrics in Kent's Repertory, which correspond to PQR. So all the symptoms which have been taken up in Allen's keynote are very, very important. Symptoms. Eyes agglutinated, morning. So this is also a first grade representation here. We go to the next PQR 7C, eye strain from swing. In the old age, that was the usual fine activity people used to undertake or females used to undertake, which is worse in the warm room, better in open air, and diseases due to defective accommodation. So it has got two components over here. And let us see what happens. Vision, accommodation defective. So see, where we find second grade rubric in Kent Repertory, vision, hypermetropia, overuse of eyes in fine work. That eye strain is very, very important. But then in modern days, we have to correspond this particular rubric like eye strain because of computer watching. You are playing games on your cellular. So the activity has replaced. In old time, the activities were different where you have the eye strain, but today's context, you have to have that kind of a flexibility to use this rubric. Now we find PQR 8A, craves sugar, child fond of it, but diarrhea results from eating. So let us see where we find this particular rubric. Stomach desires salty things, stomach desires sweet things, stomach desires sweet sugar, specific symptom, all first grade symptoms, you see. But Ellen has not given desire for salt in the first grade, which is here already been there. And then we find rectum, diarrhea, sugar after. PQR 8B, the same component of GIT symptomatology, tells us about the belching accompanied most gastric elements, flatulence, dyspepsia, belching after every meal, stomach as if it would burst with wind, belching which is difficult, finally air rushes out with great violence. Please keep track of this color code and let us see where we will find in Kent Repertory stomach distended, disorder, stomach disordered, stomach distended, stomach eructations. For belching we find eructations, eructations eating after, stomach eructations, large quantities of wind, and eructations loud. So these are the corresponding first grade representations we get in Kent Repertory. Next PQR is, again it belongs to GIT, and diarrhea, green, mucus like chopped spinach in flakes, turning green after remaining on diaper, after drinking, after eating candy or sugar, masses of mucolymph in shreddy strips or lumps with much noisy flatus, diarrhea as soon as he drinks. So let us see the corresponding rubrics. What we find in the rectum section, rectum diarrhea, we find first grade. Stool green, we find first grade representation. A stool green, spinach in flatus like, it may be flex like, most probably. It looks like there is a kind of a spelling difference. Stool, mucus, slimy. Rectum, again we find rectum diarrhea, drinking water from. As soon as he drinks water, there is a diarrhea. Rectum diarrhea, sugar after. Rectum flatus loud. So these are the first grade representation we have already seen. Now let us go to the PQR 9 where urine passes unconsciously day and night. And here we have bladder urination involuntary. Bladder urination involuntary day and night. Incontinence in bed. Bladder urination unconscious, urethra insensible. Bladder urination involuntary daytime. It is a second grade representation once again here. Bladder urination involuntary daytime and night. Again second grade representation. Very profusely Kent has represented these particular symptoms. PQR 10 tells us about the impotency. Erection fails when coition is attempted. And here we are going to see genitalia male. Erection wanting, impotency, second grade representation is there. Coitus painful in both sexes followed by bleeding from vagina. You will find this is female genitalia and genitalia pain, vagina, coitus during. Genitalia female, metrorrhagia, coitus after. So here we will find metrorrhagia in young widows, in sterility with nervous erethism at change of life. So genitalia female hypermetrorrhagia, genitalia female metrorrhagia recurrent. So these are the closest symptoms or rubrics we find here. PQR 14 tells us about chronic laryngitis of singers. High notes cause cough. And we have to see at larynx and trachea, where we find larynx and trachea, inflammation larynx, laryngitis. Inflammation larynx, singers in, very specific, particular general. Inflammation is, you can say, general symptom, and inflammation larynx, singers in is a particular general symptom. Particular symptom, larynx and trachea, voice hoarseness, singing from, again it comes as a direct symptom where we find second grade representation. Larynx and trachea, voice hoarseness, talking from, these are additional important rubrics which we should know about the PQR 14. Larynx and trachea, voice lost, aphonia because of singing. Larynx and trachea, voice loss, singers. Here, anybody can be there, not only singers. There are public speakers, leaders, lawyers, teachers, and of course, singers are there. Voice weak, so second grade representation. So, next, PQR is 15, where we find great weakness of lower extremities with trembling, cannot walk with eyes closed, walk and stands unsteadily, especially when he thinks himself unobserved. So let us see what are the corresponding rubrics we find. We find extremities, we find ataxia in coordination, second grade representation. Extremities, paralysis, lower limbs, it is for weakness. Extremities, paralysis, lower limb, painless, and extremities, trembling, very direct symptom, corresponding symptom, 3+ symptom in extremities, trembling, upper limbs are also there. Extremities, trembling hands, extremities, trembling hand, typhoid in toxemia, toxic state, typhoid. Extremities, trembling, lower limbs. Extremities, weakness is again direct symptom we are getting, great weakness of lower extremities. Extremities, weakness, lower extremities. So there is a very profuse representation of this particular PQR in Kent Repertory. We find dreams are not given in Allen's Keynote. However, it is important for us. Sleep dreams amorous, sleep dream anxious, sleep dream dead off, sleep dream frightful, sleep dreams ghost, specters, and dreams of hunger, dreams of snake. This is very important range of dreams we find here, but we have only taken for our reference while studying the Allen's Keynote. We only included this dream of snake, but however, there are other dreams are also present. Now let us go to the next PQR 17, sensation of a splinter in the throat while swallowing, in or about uterus when walking or riding. We find corresponding rubric in throat pain, splinter, as from A is the first grade, or you can say 3+ symptom, which we find throat pain, splinter from as from a swallowing on, second grade representation. And genitalia female, we find stitching in uterus, very closest to brick, but then splinter like pain is not given in Kent Repertory. Tearing pain in uterus has been given, and in rectum pain splinter like is having second grade representation. What Ellen has been telling us same thing is been correspondingly been given in Kent Repertory. PQR 18 tells us about chili when uncovered yet feels smothered if wrapped up, craves fresh air, and this rubric we are going to see at chill section. Chill uncovering and dressing, chill warm room aggravates, chill warm room coming from an open air. These are the closest rubric I could get. PQR 19 is relationship, which we don't want to see any relationship, especially in Kent Repertory, so we'll leave it. And then PQR 20, we find the aggravation part. So these are the aggravation: cold food, cold air, eating sugar, ice cream, unusual mental exertion. And we find in generalities, food, cold food aggravates, food, sweet aggravates, generalities, cold becoming after aggravation, generalities, cold wet weather aggravates, generalities, side symptoms on one side, one-sided symptoms, and especially first grade representation is given for the left side. So Argentum nitricum happens to be having the complaints which is predominantly start on the left side. And here it gives a very important miasmatic rubric in Kent Repertory, generalities, psychosis. So predominantly he has represented Argentum nitricum as a psychotic predominant remedy. However, there are other shades which we already know about it. We go to the amelioration part in Allen's keynote. Open air, craves wind blowing on the face, bathing with cold water ameliorates. So here we have generalities in Kent. Air open ameliorates, 3 plus representation. Walking in open air ameliorates, 3 plus representation. Wind cold riding in ameliorates, second grade representation. Generalities bathing cold ameliorates. So friends, that was a good correlation which we happen to see just now, and I thank you very much for your patient listening. Thanks once again. Please share and care.